What's going on, everybody? It's Quinn from Arabella's Voice Studio, back with another guitar video. Yes, I know I'm wearing the same shirt and using the same guitar. I filmed these in one day. Sue me. Today, we're going to be talking about some different ways to modulate between keys. Modulation is basically just a big word for I'm in one key, I really want to move into a different key. How do I do that without it sounding really awkward and janky? Well, you're in luck, because there are a lot of really cool ways to do this using some of the most basic ideas in harmony and music theory. One of the simplest ways to modulate between two keys is using something called a pivot chord. A pivot chord is essentially just a chord that exists in your original key and your target key. So if I were in a key like A major, lovely, we're right at home here, but I want to move to G major. G major does not exist in A major. We would have A, we would have G sharp diminished, and we would have F sharp minor. G ain't showing up. The good news is, a lot of the time you can get away with playing a minor chord instead of a diminished chord. Hold on to that little nugget of knowledge. So you have to kind of be thinking in both keys at the same time if you're trying to write something like this. In A major, we have that F sharp minor, like I said. And in G major, F sharp still shows up as a diminished chord. But like I said earlier, you can sometimes get away with playing a minor chord instead of a diminished chord. So as an example, I'm going to play you a nice little progression in A major, and at one point we're going to go down to that F sharp minor, which shows up in A major, perfectly reasonable chord for us to play, and then we're going to resolve it up a half step to G, which would not be a reasonable chord to play in the key of A major. But it's not going to sound awkward. We're going to make it work, because your brain is going to recontextualize that minor 6 of A major as the 7 chord of G. Let's try it. That last chord didn't sound wrong, did it? But now, we're in G major. That one little chord that can exist in both keys helped us move between them. Some other ways to modulate are using things called passing chords. A passing chord is essentially just a chord that kind of exists like a stepping stone between two different keys. It doesn't necessarily exist in either key, but it creates this really interesting sense of movement in a certain direction. For example, if we're in C major, and I want to move to D major. Normally, if we're in C major, that D chord would be minor, but I want it to be major. So what I'm going to do instead is play the note in between C and D, which is a C sharp, and I'm going to play a C sharp diminished chord, because that would be the 7 diminished of D major. It doesn't sound quite as smooth as those pivot chords that we were talking about before, but that's not a bad thing at all. It still creates a different but still really interesting sense of movement between the two keys. We're in C. And suddenly we're in D major. And yes, it was a little bit jarring at first that, but it worked. It got us into the right place, and those last two chords, the C sharp diminished and the D major, going from 7 diminished to 1 in the new key, made the whole thing make sense. There's so many ways that you can get around moving between all of these different keys in ways that make sense and don't force you to just go in a kind of awkward, blocky way. You can use these chords and the way that they interact with their dominance and subdominance and, you know, those like chromatic walk-ups that I mentioned with that, C diminished. There's so many different ways to move between all of these areas. We have a lot more resources on this topic on our website, which I highly encourage you to go check out. Feel free to check out all the other videos that we've got on our YouTube. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day.